After the unsuccessful campaign of the Italian army during the invasion of Greece, the Third Reich was forced to support its allies, otherwise the situation in the Balkans would have unfolded completely differently than planned. The German General Staff began planning Operation Marita, which was aimed at capturing Greece. The Kriegsmarine Command demanded significant naval forces from Mussolini in order to neutralize the British on sea communications and prevent them from transferring expeditionary forces from North Africa. The deteriorating military situation in Africa and Greece at the beginning of 1941 revealed the need for certain military measures on the part of the Italian Navy, Regia Marina, if it wanted to retain the theater of operations. The Germans insisted that a serious naval operation should be undertaken to restore the status quo in the Mediterranean area. An important role in the planning was played by the erroneous information provided by the Luftwaffe that German aircraft had damaged the British battleships Valiant and Barham in the Mediterranean. Perhaps the command of the Italian Navy would not have decided on this operation if it had known that these battleships were standing undamaged in the port of Alexandria, ready to go to sea. At their urgent request and in accordance with the general situation, the command of the Italian Navy, Supermarina, developed an operation plan that provided for a rapid attack on British convoys by cruising forces supported by the high-speed battleship Vittorio Veneto and aircraft of the 10th Luftwaffe Air Corps. This is how the idea of the Italian Navy's operation, codenamed Gaudo, was born. Under the command of Vice Admiral Iakino, the most powerful cruising forces of the Italian Navy gathered, reinforced by the newest battleship Vittorio Veneto of the Littorio class, equipped with 15-inch guns and having a displacement of 45,000 tons. The first division of the heavy cruisers of the Counter-Admiral Cattaneo included the Zara, as well as the Fiume and Pola of the same type. The formation of the Sansonetti Counter-Admiral includes the heavy cruisers Bolzano, Trento, and Trieste. In addition, under the command of Admiral Legnani, there were two of the best light cruisers in their class, the Giuseppe Garibaldi and the Luigi di Savoia Duca della Abruzzi. The destroyer divisions numbered 13 ships. In coordination with Germany, reconnaissance and air support fell on the shoulders of the 10th Luftwaffe Aviation Corps, whose aircraft were to operate from Sicily. In the Mediterranean, the British had three operational formations subordinate to Admiral Cunningham, commander of the fleet. The first A formation, which included the aircraft carrier Formidable, the battleships Barham, Warspite, and Valiant, as well as 9 destroyers, was under the command of the fleet commander himself. Rear Admiral Pritham Whipple's second unit, B, consisted of the light cruisers Gloucester, Perth, Arion, Ajax, and 4 destroyers. 3 more destroyers were included in the third formation. Intensive aerial reconnaissance by Italians and Germans in the region hinted to British analysts about the upcoming operation. The commander of the force, Admiral Cunningham, decided to take the risk and intercept the Italian squadron, but ordered that this intention be kept strictly secret, especially since the British squadron was led at that time by the admiral most competent and aggressive in the British Navy.
Intelligence has received information that a large convoy is scheduled to leave Piraeus for Alexandria on March 26, 1940. On the evening of March 26, the Italian ships left their bases in Taranto, Naples, Messina, and Brindisi and joined forces on the morning of March 27 in the Augusta area. The main part of the formation was to pass along the northern coast of Crete, and the Vittorio Veneto, with the support of the 3rd Division of Heavy Cruisers, planned to pass along the southern coast, where it should join the main forces at the eastern tip of Crete. Contrary to the expectations of Admiral Iakino, who was seriously afraid of the actions of the British aviation based in Crete and Malta, the Luftwaffe command did not provide him with the promised air support. Therefore, on the afternoon of March 27th, the 3rd Division of Cruisers unhindered the British reconnaissance aircraft in the Ionian Sea. After receiving a message about the discovery of Italian ships, Admiral Cunningham ordered to move towards the Italian fleet in the strictest secrecy and transfer it to the convoy so that it would turn to Alexandria. But Cunningham was informed about only 3 heavy cruisers. The scout did not notice the rest of the ships due to poor visibility. Rear Admiral Pritham Whipple's Unit B also advanced to Crete from the Aegean Sea. Due to problems on the battleship Warspite, Cunningham's squadron was moving at 22 knots. The World War I-era battleship Barham could barely maintain that speed. The flagship of the squadron, the battleship Warspite, was trying to fix the revealed mechanical problems and was also lagging behind. The Australian cruiser Vendetta, another World War I veteran, was traveling so slowly that she received orders to head back to Alexandria. Therefore, Compound B, taking advantage of the advantage in speed, pulled ahead by 90 miles. By dawn on the 28th of March, the fleets of both opponents arrived in the area south of Gavdos. On the morning of March 28, 1941, at exactly 6 o'clock, Admiral Iakino launched a reconnaissance aircraft from the deck of the battleship Vittorio Veneto. The pilot immediately reported that Admiral Pritham Whipple's British squadron was only 50 miles ahead of the lead Italian cruiser. At about 6:35 a.m. on March 28th, a reconnaissance aircraft had already detected the British ships, and in an attempt to hide his intentions, Counter-Admiral Pritham Whipple turned directly towards the Italian squadron. The combined Italian fleet increased its speed from 23 to 30 knots in order to engage a numerically inferior enemy. At 7:40, an observer on the British cruiser Orion noticed the smoke of the Italian cruisers. Realizing that the enemy was superior in firepower, the British admiral ordered a full-speed retreat to Cunningham's squadron, hoping to bring the enemy to the guns of the battleships. At 8 hours and 12 minutes, the nearest Italian cruiser, the Trieste, opened fire with its 8-inch guns on the British cruiser Gloucester, which was closing the British order. The cruiser Gloucester returned fire with her 6-inch guns, but the shells fell short. Vice Admiral Sansonetti ordered to open fire from the maximum range, but not a single shell found its target.
On board the battleship Vittorio Veneto, Admiral Iakino was alarmed by the rapid withdrawal of the British squadron. The timidity of the British embarrassed him. He sensed a trap, and after an hour of fruitless pursuit, Sansonetti decided to turn back. But the British stopped retreating and began to pursue the 3rd Division, remaining out of range of the guns. In fact, Sansonetti did not depart, but followed the orders of Admiral Iakino, who planned to squeeze the British between heavy cruisers and the Vittorio Veneto, armed with powerful and long-range 381mm guns. He ordered the cruisers to withdraw. Meanwhile, the main British fleet, under Admiral Cunningham's command, was within a 70-mile radius. Upon learning of the Italian attack on the Pritham Whipple cruisers, Admiral Cunningham ordered the newest and fastest battleship to reach full speed and use the destroyers as escorts. The aircraft carrier Formidable was ordered to take off its ferry Albacore biplanes for a torpedo attack on the Italian fleet, but all aircraft were able to take off no earlier than 10 o'clock in the morning. Pritham Whipple radioed Cunningham about the meeting with the Italian squadron and warned about the presence of the battleship. When the battleship reached firing range at 10:50, Pritham Whipple ordered a hasty withdrawal from the battlefield. For the second time, Pritham Whipple ordered a retreat when 15-inch shells from the battleship began to fall around his ships. The Italians managed to close the distance, and 2 British cruisers were easily damaged by close explosions. Planes from the aircraft carrier Formidable did not allow the Italians to start the chase on time, forcing the cruisers and the battleship to move north. The Italian attack was thwarted by the arrival of the first wave of Albacore torpedo bombers, as the battleship Vittorio Veneto was forced to undertake an anti-torpedo maneuver, and this allowed the squadron of British cruisers to escape. Admiral Iakino was still unable to determine the true strength of the British fleet. His own aerial reconnaissance turned out to be in an inadequate situation, and the promised support of Italian and German aviation was not implemented. All he knew was that Pritham Whipple had turned to the west, trying to get his cruisers out of the battle. With this fragmentary information, Admiral Iakino decided to attack the British cruisers once more. The commander of the British fleet ordered to move to the enemy to destroy the Italian flagship. At the same time, reconnaissance aircraft were searching for the enemy, and when they discovered Iakino's squadron, it was attacked several times by British aircraft from 14 hours 20 minutes. Finding himself without the air cover promised by the Luftwaffe, Iakino was forced to defend himself from air attacks. Having found no convoys with spent fuel reserves and without air cover, Admiral Iakino decided to retreat. The torpedo attack alarmed him, showing that the British squadron had at least one aircraft carrier. All Italian ships were ordered to turn northwest and head home. However, Iakino himself did not feel the need to leave at increased speed and went economically, saving precious fuel, at a speed of 15 knots. The Italian admiral was cautious, fearing an attack by the British fleet. However, he did not think that the British would be so aggressive in their desire to destroy him. In fact, the British fleet has just begun its attack. The aircraft carrier Formidable prepared the launch of the second wave of torpedo bombers, even though it was attacked by Italian torpedo planes. When the Italian air attack ended, all the planes were lifted into the air. Field aircraft from Greek airfields could not achieve a single hit, although they attacked the squadron in several approaches. But at 15 hours and 20 minutes, a flight of torpedo bombers from the Formidable entered the battleship from a good angle. At 15 o'clock, 3 Albacore torpedo bombers discovered the Italian battleship and approached it. At that moment, the Italians were busy repelling the attack of the Blenheim bombers, which joined the pursuit of the Italian Navy. While the Italian gunners focused all their attention on attacking the high-flying Blenheim bombers, the Albacore torpedo bombers flew up at low altitude from the direction of the sun, which was a complete surprise to the captain of the battleship Vittorio Veneto. From a distance of 900 meters, one of the torpedo bombers managed to drop a torpedo before being shot down. This British torpedo bomber was the only British loss in this battle.
The battleship Vittorio Veneto was hit in the stern under the waterline, took on water, reduced speed, and received trim on the stern. The torpedo hit the stern from the starboard side at a depth of almost 6 meters below the waterline. Due to the explosion, one of the shafts jammed and power plant number 4 failed. The emergency team acted unprofessionally, as a result of which, in 10 minutes, the battleship gained almost 3,500 tons of water, having received a roll to starboard of about 4 degrees and a trim to the stern of about 3 meters. The situation was aggravated by the close detonation of the bomb. The leak increased, and the main steering machines were out of order. It took an hour to get the leak under control and regain 10 knots, and it took another 2 hours to accelerate to 16. His crew made great efforts to make the ship go full speed again, but the battleship was able to go only at low speed. Now, Admiral Iakino was only trying to reach the Italian port safely. Although he still had no idea about it, Admiral Cunningham's fleet was only 65 miles away and was rapidly approaching. Rightly fearing a repeat of the air attacks, Iakino ordered all ships of the squadron, as part of the marching order, to turn to Brindisi. Lignani's light cruisers headed to the vanguard for reconnaissance, as Iakino believed that the British would not be able to catch up with him. At 17 o'clock, Iakino was alarmed by a report of 2 groups of British cruisers approaching his battered battleship. The 3 British battleships, still invisible, were directly behind him. At about 19:20 hours after dark, the third and final air attack took place. 6 Albacore torpedo bombers and 4 Fairey Swordfish torpedo bombers from the aircraft carrier Formidable approached the Italian fleet, which formed a protective order around the damaged battleship Vittorio Veneto. The main British fleet approached within 50 miles and prepared for a night attack. Traveling at a speed of 30 knots, the destroyers ahead spread out in a 7-mile zone, creating a head patrol engaged in the search for the enemy. At 19:30, the obsolete biplanes made their third raid of the day. They were met by a curtain of anti-aircraft fire from Italian ships, a chaotic tangle of anti-aircraft machine gun tracks and exploding shells and searchlight beams. Only one hit was noted during this attack, but it turned out to be critical for the outcome of the battle. The heavy cruiser Paula was hit by a torpedo and froze, losing steam. 3 compartments were flooded, including the engine room. All electricity was lost. Due to the darkness, his exit from the warrant was noticed only at 20 hours 15 minutes, about half an hour after the attack. The rest of the Italian ships, unaware of what had happened, developed additional speed, heading west into the darkness of the night. Admiral Iakino discovered the absence of the cruiser Paula. Still preventing the presence of a powerful British force nearby, he ordered the squadron to be deployed to Cape Colonna, and the cruisers Zara and Fiume, along with 4 destroyers, were sent to help the damaged Palla. The Italian ships sailed at a speed of 16 knots, saving fuel. Their captains believed that they would be able to complete the rescue operation before sunrise, which would avoid any danger. Meanwhile, Admiral Cunningham had his own reasons for concern. If he conducts a night attack on the Italian fleet departing its speed, the morning will find his ships in the range of Italian and German coastal aviation. His subordinates warned him about the danger of such harassment, but he ignored their advice about the necessary caution and launched an attack. The valiant battleship slowed down to allow itself to be overtaken by the flagship battleship. Several night battles showed the British all the advantages of using radar at night. They developed airborne radars in complete secrecy in the 1930s, and using them had a good effect. In the early 1930s, the great Italian inventor Guglielmo Marconi, who created radio, actively worked on the problem of shortwave radar, but after his death in 1937, the results of his searches were not used. The Italians had no idea that the British Navy was equipped with such a device.
In the dark, the Orion light cruiser detected the helpless Italian cruiser Pola on its radar. At about 22 hours and 20 minutes, the British destroyers discovered the Catania squadron moving counter-course towards Cunningham's compound. At that moment, the British battleships were led by the battleship Warspite. Admiral Cunningham ordered his squadron to change course in order to intercept targets spotted on radar. The Italian ships were completely unaware of the presence of an enemy nearby. Neither the British nor the Italian fleets preferred to engage at night, but the British had been conducting night exercises using radar since the 1930s, which gave them a significant advantage. At about 22 hours and 30 minutes, observers on British ships noticed Italian cruisers sailing in the wake. At 22 hours and 27 minutes, the unsuspecting Italian cruisers were illuminated by destroyers, after which they were attacked almost point-blank by a powerful salvo of British battleships. Admiral Cunningham ordered his battleships to set a parallel course. Their 12-inch guns were aimed at targets only 3.5 kilometers away. At the signal, the destroyer Greyhound illuminated the Fiume with a searchlight. 3 British battleships opened fire with their main-caliber guns, and within 5 minutes, Fiume, Zara, and the destroyer Alfieri were reduced to flaming wrecks. The Fiume cruiser was the first to come under enemy fire. It received 6 to 7 direct hits. Fires started on its deck. The main-caliber aft turret was torn off the barbette by a direct hit and thrown into the water. Several holes formed in the starboard side, and it received a strong list. The British considered the Fiume cruiser to be out of action and transferred fire to the Zara, and the Fiume sank in 23 hours and 15 minutes. The Zara lasted a little longer. A total of 20 main and auxiliary caliber volleys from 3 British battleships hit the cruiser. At about 0:30 hours, the fire spread throughout the ship, and the crew abandoned it. The rest of the Italian destroyers attempted a torpedo attack and then disappeared into the night. The British battleships turned 90 degrees to avoid the torpedo salvo, and Cunningham ordered the destroyers to pursue the departing Italian ships. The battle turned into a series of random skirmishes between the battling destroyers, and at that time another Italian ship, the destroyer Joseph Carducci, was sunk. The 2 surviving Italian destroyers departed at full speed to the northwest. The destroyer Havoc fired a flare into the area where the damaged cruiser Zara was supposedly located, but instead the motionless Polo was illuminated. The cruiser was mistaken for the battleship Vittorio Veneto, and Havoc, firing twice at the bridge of the spotted ship, reported that it had discovered the Italian battleship, quote, standing, without running, but undamaged. A prize crew was sent to the cruiser Pola, and the British found about 200 Italian sailors remaining on board. The British command considered the possibility of towing the captured ship to Egypt, but abandoned this idea. The cruiser Pola, deprived of running, escaped the fire of the British ships. They intended to take it as a trophy, but later Cunningham ordered the Zara and Pola to be finished off with torpedoes, and at about 2 hours and 40 minutes, both repeated the fate of the Fiume.
The Pridham Whipple cruisers pursuing the Italian battleship reported spotting flares in the area.
They were launched from the cruiser Pola. Admiral Cunningham considered that this was a new squadron of Italian ships approaching the battlefield and ordered, in order to avoid confusion in the dark, all ships not involved in the battle to turn north at the same time, which allowed the Italian fleet to escape. The British destroyers leading the search discovered the damaged cruiser Zara and sank it. The crew of the cruiser was removed, and the helpless ship was scuttled. The destroyers began to rescue the Italian sailors trapped in the water, but the latter turned out to be more than the destroyers could accept. About 900 Italians were boarded, and by 8 o'clock the next morning, the rescue operation was stopped due to the appearance of German dive bombers. The British radioed the Italian command to the coordinates of the sailors in the water, and in the evening, 300 more people were rescued. At 7 o'clock in the morning, all Cunningham's ships gathered in a marching order and, fearing attacks by German aircraft, turned to Alexandria. After suffering losses, the Italian squadron, including the damaged Vittorio Veneto and its escort, returned to base. The British fleet also withdrew to avoid being subjected to air raids. The Battle of Cape Matapan ended in a crushing defeat for Italy. Although Admiral Iakino's squadron was superior to the British, the newest battleship and 6 heavy cruisers against 3 obsolete battleships and 4 light cruisers. Nevertheless, in this battle, Regia Marina lost 2 destroyers and 3 of the most powerful cruisers of their fleet, which were a serious source of concern for the British in the Mediterranean. Moreover, the British ships did not receive any damage in the battle. In the battle, the British side lost 3 pilots, the crew of 1 torpedo bomber, and the Italians lost 3 heavy cruisers, 2 destroyers, and more than 2,400 sailors. The Italian battleship Vittorio Veneto was severely damaged. The defeat in the battle at Cape Matapan led to the fact that in the future, significant forces of the Italian fleet did not leave the base, and a large Italian squadron went to sea only to surrender to the Allies in 1943. After this devastating defeat, for a long time the Italian fleet did not undertake any serious operations, allowing the British to operate freely off Crete and the coast of Greece. This decisive victory, however, failed to radically change the current situation. Over the next 2 months, the British fleet suffered significant losses in the Mediterranean from attacks by German bombers and submarines. Unfortunately, many of the ships that took part in the battle at Cape Matapan were subsequently lost during the evacuation of the Crete garrison. If you liked this fascinating story about naval warfare and the heroism of sailors, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your opinion in the comments. Which battle of the 1940s, in your opinion, was the most significant? Share your point of view.